Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Today I want to show you how we can configure HTTPS for the access of ArgoCD UI. We're going to use various components of Kubernetes, but once we have set up everything, the certificate will be created automatically and will also be updated automatically. This means you can't forget that it will expire, it will always be work. This video actually was inspired by a comment, so if you have any questions or ideas for future videos, let me know down in the comments below. So the plan for today is I'm going to give you a 1 minute overview of the components that are going to be involved, and then we jump over and I show you the entire demo. As always, if you're interested in the slides or the code, you can scan the QR code or you'll find the link down below in the description. So now the plan for today is, first we're going to create a new AKS cluster, but you can use any Kubernetes cluster. It doesn't matter, but since I'm the Azure guy, I use AKS for this. After that, we're going to create our gateway API. I'm going to use Envoy, but you can use any solution you want. I will also link you down in the description below the playlist for my gateway API series, so you can find all the details and everything you need to know about it. After that, we're going to install the Cert-Manager. That's the component that will take care of creating and updating our certificates. Then obviously we're going to install ArgoCD. And there we have one flag we have to set during the deployment, which I'm going to tell you all the details about during the deployment. But that's already it. We don't need anything else, nothing very special. So just this 4 components in the end, and we'll have HTTPS access to the UI. So with this, let's switch over to the terminal and let's get started with the demo. All right, here in the terminal, as always, let me define a couple of variables first. So these variables are for our AKS cluster, like the name, the location, and the resource group. Then some information about the gateway API. So the namespace we're going to deploy it in, what's the name of the gateway, and also the name of the gateway class. Then some information about our Cert-Manager and ClusterIssuer. In this case, just the name of the ClusterIssuer and the namespace where we're going to deploy our Cert-Manager. And lastly, some information about ArgoCD. So first we have here the namespace where I'm going to deploy it and the URL I'm going to use to access the UI. With this out of the way, let's create a new resource group and then we deploy everything inside this resource group. Now with the resource group created, let's deploy our AKS cluster. As you can see, it's as simple as possible. I only provide my name and the resource group. Now the deployment will take around 5 minutes. This means I'm going to stop the video here and we'll continue once the deployment is finished. All right, the cluster has been created. Now we can download the credentials and so we can access the cluster. Next up, we're going to deploy the gateway API or the gateway controller. I'm using Envoy for this, so I'm just deploying the Helm chart in a new namespace and I create the namespace during the deployment. If you're interested in the gateway API and all the details, you'll find a link in the description down below for my, I think, 20-part series where I explain all the details and everything you need to know. For now, I'm just going to quickly over it, so I'm not going too much into detail. As you can see, the Envoy controller has been created, and now we have to create 2 more resources. The first one is the gateway class, which configures what controller to use to process the requests, in our case Envoy. And after this, we're going to create the gateway, which will contain all the listeners. This means we can configure on what port and what URL we're listening. But first, let me paste the gateway class. As you can see, what's important here is the type is gateway class. We provide a name, and here we also provide the controller. And since I'm using Envoy, I use Envoy here. If you're using something else, then you will have to check the documentation for your controller. Then we're going to apply this. After that, we are going to create our gateway. So let me copy it from my notes and I'll paste it in here. And if we just quickly go over it, we can see here the kind is gateway. We have it in its own namespace. Then we already have here a link to our Cert-Manager. This means the Cert-Manager will automatically create the certificates. We don't have to do anything there. Then we have our gateway class. So that's the reference to the class we just created. And lastly, we have two listeners. So the first one is just a general listening on port 80. And then we have the one for ArgoCD. So what we can see here is we are listening on port 443 for HTTPS. And we're also listening for our URL. So that's the ArgoCD UI, I think I called it, .programwithwolfgang.com. Lastly, or the last part of this listener is the TLS certificate. So you just tell the gateway API and the Cert-Manager where to store the certificate. So it's in the secret named ArgoCD UI TLS. Then we're going to apply this. And now it might take a couple minutes, because right now what Kubernetes does is it links the gateway to the gateway class, and Azure also creates a public IP address. This means we can now get this IP address and configure our DNS to point to this IP address for the URL ArgoCD UI. Now I think I talked long enough, so let's check our gateway. And we can see here, we have our public IP address. What's important is the program state is true. This might take a couple minutes to switch from false to true, but if it's not switching, if it stays at false, then you have configured something wrong. Then you have to look into the events and what was going on. But again, all the details are in the description down below. For now, just everything is good. The second thing we can check is our gateway class. So just a kubectl get gateway class, and then we can also see the accepted state is set to true. Then what we also could do is we could query our public IP address. So that's the public IP address we have here, but if you want to use it in the code later, you can just query it with this command. So it's just using kubectl to get the gateway and then query the address. If we print this, if I could type, then we can see it's the same public IP address. Now I'm going to copy this and switch over to the Azure portal and update my DNS there. Here in the Azure portal, we can see I have already the DNS record created when I was testing this before, but the IP address is wrong. So we have to update this record. And what you can see here, the record is argocd.programwithwolfgang.com. So I think I said before ArgoCD UI, so this is wrong. The URL is ArgoCD. Then I set the time to live for 1 minute. It's just for me for testing. And there we paste our IP address. So that's everything you have to do to set up the DNS entry. Now the URL argocd.programwithwolfgang.com points to this public IP address. And this public IP address is my gateway API. This means the entry point to my cluster. So now let's switch back to the terminal and we're going to install the Cert-Manager and ArgoCD. Back in the terminal, let's clean up this window and add the Helm repo for the Cert-Manager. So once this has been added and also updated, we are going to install the Cert-Manager with the Helm install. So what we do is here, Helm install for the Cert-Manager, then I provide its own namespace and create this namespace. Then I'm using the version 1.19.2. As of recording, the newest version is 1.20.0, but I spent a couple hours yesterday figuring out why it didn't work, and it seems to be that there's a bug in the version 1.20, and I was not able to get the certificate. Then I switched back to the old version and it worked flawlessly. So for now, I would stick with the version 1.19, and if you watch this video sometimes in the future, hopefully there's a fix out. The last two parameters are to tell the Cert-Manager that we're using the Gateway API, and also to install the CRDs, the custom resource definitions that are needed for the certificates. So this is, for example, a certificate object or an order object. So everything we need to get and store the certificate. So as you can see, it's already installed. And with the Cert-Manager, that's basically the brain of the operations, but then we also need the worker. And this is the ClusterIssuer. With the ClusterIssuer, we configure from where we want to get our certificate. So if I paste this in here, we can see here the kind is ClusterIssuer. We have a name. Then what's important is here under Acme, we have the URL to the server. So in my case, I'm using the Let's Encrypt production server. But I've also added here the Let's Encrypt staging server. And always when you try to get something set up for the first time, use the staging server. Because with the production server, you have some limited rates. This means you can only register it a certain amount of time. And if you just delete it and recreate it, you will run out of this limit quite quickly. And then you have to wait a week. With the staging, you will never run into any limit problems. And once you have confirmed it works, then you can easily switch over to the production server and you will get a production certificate. On the bottom here, the solver, I'm using the HTTP solver. This means I have a well-known path where I add a token. And then Let's Encrypt will check if this token is there. And if it is there, I've proven that I own this domain or URL. Again, all the details will be in the link in the description down below. For now, let's just say we configure Cert-Manager and Cert-Manager will take care of everything to create the certificate. We don't have to think much about it. The only thing that's important is we have here a link to our gateway and also to the namespace where it is deployed. So the Cert-Manager knows what gateway to use. Then let's apply this. Now after applying it, we wait a couple seconds and the ClusterIssuer will register with the server. And if we now do a kubectl get ClusterIssuer, we actually don't need the A because it's a global object. So it's not in a specific namespace. Then we can see here the Acme account was registered with the Acme server. The status is true and the type is ready. So no error message, everything worked as expected. Now the last step is to actually deploy ArgoCD. So now add the Helm chart and we're also going to update it while adding it. Then we are going to deploy it. So you just use Helm install. I use the version 9.4.15, the newest version as of recording. I provide the namespace and I create the namespace. And then this last parameter is the important one. So we set the config params server insecure equals true. This means by default, ArgoCD expects a call on port 443. This means HTTPS. But since when we call our cluster, we have HTTPS to the entry point of the cluster. And from then on, we use HTTP. So with this parameter, we configure ArgoCD to accept HTTP requests. That's everything you have to do actually. Only set this one parameter and then you can easily use HTTPS if you have an ingress, a gateway API or some other Azure services like a front door before. Just to check that everything has been deployed, let's do a kubectl get service. So you can see we have all the services running and we also want to copy the name of this service that ends with ArgoCD server. If you install the Helm chart, it uses as the first part the name of the Helm deployment. So in my case, this was ArgoCD. So we see here ArgoCD and then the service is named ArgoCD server. I'm sure you can find somewhere in the documentation how to rename this, but for now, let's go with the name as it is. And the last step to have everything working is we have to create an HTTP route. And this HTTP route is the link from our gateway to our service of ArgoCD. So what we can see here is the type is HTTP route. We have it in the same namespace as our ArgoCD deployment. Then we have a reference to a parent. This is our gateway. So we provide here the name and the namespace of our gateway. We provide what URL. So that's the argocd.programwithwolfgang.com. And lastly, we provide what should happen if these parameters are right. This means if somebody calls with my URL, the gateway, what should happen? And this here are the rules. Here I say, forward the request to a service named ArgoCD server on port 80. So that's the service we have just seen. And port 80 works because we set the insecure flag to true. Then we're going to apply this. And now we have everything set up. So this means the Cert-Manager in the meantime should have created our TLS certificate. Then we have the link from the gateway to ArgoCD, and we also have our DNS pointing to the gateway. So now let's switch over to browser, open the URL, and then we should see that we can see the ArgoCD UI. So also paste here the URL. That's the URL we're going to call on HTTPS. Here in the browser, let's use HTTPS. What's important is that you don't use HTTP because we haven't configured a redirect from port 80 to 443. So HTTP would fail, but with HTTPS, argocd.programwithwolfgang.com, we enter this, and we can see we have here the ArgoCD UI. You also have here a secure connection. If you open this, we can see we have a certificate from Let's Encrypt. And if you open this information, we can see here our certificate. So it is for argocd.programwithwolfgang.com. It's from Let's Encrypt, and it is valid for 90 days. And everything was done by the Cert-Manager fully automatically. This means once it's set up, I don't have to think about it. And usually if you use Kubernetes, you already have Cert-Manager for all your other applications. So there's almost nothing you have to do. Just set the insecure flag of ArgoCD and create the HTTP route, and that's it. Also, you have to update the gateway to listen for URL. But it should only take a couple minutes, and then you have HTTPS for your UI. That's everything I wanted to show you today. So I hope you have seen today how easy it is to get HTTPS working for the ArgoCD UI. Just as a quick recap, today we created our new AKS cluster, but you can use any Kubernetes cluster you want. Then we deployed the gateway API, in my case Envoy. Also here you can use whatever gateway you want. Then we configured the DNS, so my URL is pointing to the gateway. Next up, we deployed the Cert-Manager and configured it to use Let's Encrypt. This means the Cert-Manager will automatically check the gateway. There it saw my URL and created a certificate for my URL. Also, in case if I let my cluster live for the next 90 days, the Cert-Manager will update the certificate automatically before it expires. Usually that's around 30 days, but it will take care of it, so I don't have to worry. Lastly, we deployed ArgoCD, and there we set the insecure flag of the server to true. This means that our server accepts HTTP requests. By default, it only accepts HTTPS requests. The last resource was the HTTP route, and there we had the link from the gateway to our ArgoCD UI service. This means we tell the gateway where to send the request if our URL is called. In the end, we tested it, and we have seen that we have HTTPS and we have a fully valid certificate. I don't know how long the video has been so far, but it only takes a couple minutes to set up everything up. And once it's set up, it will automatically update the certificates and you don't have to touch it anymore. So I hope this was useful. As I said, this video was requested as a comment. So if you have any questions or ideas for future videos, let me know down in the comments below. I would also appreciate if you could share and like the video. It helps out the channel, and I'll see you next week with another video.